Food choices that drive hormone swings and hunger. So, if you can remember back from our discussion on those four hormones that kind of regulate the hunger and satiety signals in our body, there were certain foods that tend to create sugar spikes, blood sugar spikes, and then corresponding insulin spikes to kind of deal with that blood sugar. So these are really the sugar-rich foods, the baked goods, the candies, sugar-sweetened beverages, refined carbohydrates, any of those white flour products, whether that is a bread or a pasta, a cereal grain. But these are the foods that drive that blood sugar up very quickly, create that corresponding insulin surge. And what that does, the insulin's doing its job to pull blood sugar into the muscles and into the liver, but what that does is it ultimately signals storage. So any of that energy that we cannot use relatively quickly is stored. It's stored as glycogen in the muscles and liver, but it's also stored as fat if we can't use it quickly enough. So what we're doing when we're eating those types of foods, especially larger portions of them, is we're putting our body into a storage mode. And then as insulin brings the blood sugar down, we kind of crash, and that's when we hit those cravings for more carbohydrates, and ultimately that happens quicker than it should. So that drives hunger a little bit longer down the road, maybe a couple hours even after a carbohydrate. So next we will talk about skipping meals and the impact that that has on our hunger. So skipping meals, if that's not part of your plan, can have a significant impact on your hunger. So if you're the type of individual that eats kind of 3 square meals, or maybe you do 5 smaller meals, skipping any of those meals or snacks can really force you to overeat and drive hunger at that next meal. So if you're the type of person that eats on a regular schedule, deviating from that set pattern can really spurn hunger and possibly force you to overeat at that next meal. So now that we've seen some of the food choices and habits that can ultimately stimulate hunger just hours down the road, now let's unpack some of the food choices and habits that ultimately can help us control hunger for hours into the future, hopefully allowing us to be more mindful of portion control at that next meal or snack. Food choices that help balance hunger hormones. So it is widely understood that fiber-rich, healthy carbohydrates slow down the rate of digestion. So these are foods like fruits and vegetables, whole grain products, beans, nuts and seeds, things like that that contain a lot of fiber. The body really has to work hard to pull that fiber apart, digest it, break it down, and that makes those carbohydrates available more slowly, causing a much more graded response with the blood sugar and the insulin. And of course, meats have virtually no impact on blood sugar and corresponding insulin. Healthy fats as well are not going to impact blood sugar, but also can slow down the rate of digestion. And of course, we also want to make sure the portion sizes that we're consuming are appropriate, as well as the amount of calories in that meal or snack. Combining macronutrients to satisfy hunger. So we know certainly that fiber plays an important role in slowing digestion, in keeping blood sugar more stable and insulin more stable. Healthy protein sources can do this as well. and healthy fats. What research has shown over time is that when we consume these three food components together within a snack or within a meal, that gives us the best case scenario in terms of helping to keep us fuller longer. So when meals and snacks include a good, healthy, high fiber carbohydrate, includes some protein and some healthy fat, that's really going to slow the rate of digestion. It's going to keep our blood sugar more stable. It's going to keep our insulin more stable. And it's going to set us up for being satisfied with our food contents longer, sustaining us till that next meal or snack. So what might that actually look like if you were consuming those three macronutrients together? So there are a lot of different options here. That might be a Greek yogurt with some dried fruit and nuts, for instance. You're getting good healthy protein, you're getting fiber-rich foods, you're getting some healthy fats mixed in there. That could be something as simple as a low-fat cheese stick along with some apple and peanut butter. That could be a turkey sandwich with an American cheese, for instance, and a side salad. So we're getting a blend with each one of those. We're getting a blend of good fiber content, healthy proteins, and healthy fat content. So we're going to take a look at this graphic again and kind of compare and contrast those two different meal patterns that we just spoke about. So the first one, going back to kind of a meal rich in refined carbohydrates and maybe some sugar-rich products, maybe larger portion sizes than we may need. So that's going to be represented in meal pattern A, where you see again the glucose kind of skyrocketing in a very tight pattern. And then you see the insulin surge. And what happens at that point is the storage takes place. So we're pulling the blood sugar out of the circulatory system into the muscles, into the liver, and then anything left over is then stored. But what also happens is we see a corresponding drop very precipitously in the blood sugar, which in a relatively short period of time can leave us actually feeling hungry again. Because remember what happens when the blood sugar gets to a certain point, that's going to create a scenario where we're secreting more of the ghrelin or the hunger hormone, which is going to kind of cause us to crave carbohydrates again. So now we'll take a look at kind of that second meal pattern, which we really just talked about in terms of combining foods that especially have fiber-rich carbohydrates, that have maybe a healthy source of protein and a healthy fat. So that's going to be represented here in this graphic by meal pattern B. So one thing you notice about it right off the bat is it's a much gradual, much lesser increase in the blood sugar, and will be met with a corresponding increase in insulin. So at this rate, the body really isn't going to be signaling storage, because you've supplied what's likely a reasonable amount of energy to be able to burn through in the next several hours. And then when the blood sugar returns back to normal, you don't get that bottoming out that we experienced in that meal pattern A. So you're not going to get the same hunger cravings. So now we're going to talk about some of the broader lifestyle habits that can help us control hunger. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about meal patterns and meal timing and spacing. Lifestyle habits and hunger. So we're going to look at a couple of different meal pattern thought processes. The first one being really, which is a more traditional viewpoint on meal timing and spacing, which is eating regular meals. And keeping to a set schedule with those meals. Whether you're eating 3 square meals a day at regular intervals, or you're eating even 5 to 7 smaller meals and snacks at regular intervals. The thought process behind this is that you're controlling the portion sizes better within those meals because they are regularly scheduled. You're not waiting quite as long in between meals, and ideally you're controlling those hunger hormones because you're eating hopefully the right kinds of food and at the right portions to help you control those hunger hormones. Again, so you're not getting those wild swings in blood sugar spikes, and insulin then drops that blood sugar down and creates cravings again. So hopefully by doing this, you're avoiding that whole phenomenon and keeping that from taking place. So this meal pattern really can be pretty beneficial in terms of controlling hunger. And if that works for you, I would absolutely advise that you stick with it and continue to kind of tweak those meal patterns and meals and snacks to make sure that it's optimal for you to be able to control those hormones and control your hunger in and out of each meal. So next we'll take a look at a totally different meal pattern that actually encourages skipping meals. So we'll talk about that next. So we've just finished up discussing kind of a more traditional style of meal pattern in which you're eating regular meals, 3 meals a day, or even 5 to 7 smaller meals and snacks per day. But with this approach, you're really focused on eating regular meals and snacks at regular time intervals, and in doing so, you can be very successful in controlling kind of those hunger hormones and never filling up too much and having those wild swings of blood sugar and insulin that we want to avoid if we're trying to maintain our hunger and our weight. So this meal pattern is definitely different, and it can seem to be counterintuitive, but research has shown a number of benefits with respect to hunger control. So this option 2 we're going to talk about now is more of an intermittent fasting style of eating, or altering the length of time that you allow your meals and snacks to flow within a given 24-hour period. So the time during your fasting period, your body really switches into more of a fat burning mode. So you see that glucagon hormone really kicking in, which helps us to release stored forms of energy to sustain us. Again, the research does show some very positive results in terms of weight loss, in terms of overall calorie consumption during your 24-hour day period, as well as some other benefits in terms of increases in growth hormone and better insulin sensitivity and glucose control. So the eating windows would be an 8-hour eating window, which is probably the most common form of intermittent fasting. That might fall between 1 p.m. and 9 p.m., 11 a.m. And 7 p.m. is another option, or a more reduced version as well, which would be even a 6-hour eating window between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. or 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. Now, of course, this isn't going to be for everyone. This may be a good thing to consider for the individual that doesn't consider themselves your traditional breakfast type eater. Maybe their first meal is falling in the late morning hours or even the early afternoon hours. So this is a newer concept for sure. Definitely gaining traction, and more studies are coming out on this type of meal pattern. However, the important thing to keep in mind is whether you're eating 3 square meals a day or an intermittent fasting approach, we still need to keep in mind those principles of healthy eating. So we'll wrap up our discussion in part 3, continuing on with other lifestyle factors for controlling hunger.